So this is really the last time we had a meeting. Yeah, the way that ends. Wow. Yeah, it was, well, always before the budget, I guess. Yeah. So, oh, really. Carol, it's good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you?
Good thing.
Okay, I think we can get this meeting to order. Thank you everyone for coming. Finance Audit Budget Committee meeting, special meeting of April 15th. I'll take roll call. Councilmember Mangone.
Here.
Councilmember Duran.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Halter.
Here.
We have a quorum. 3 members are here. Our first order of business is to elect a chair. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to elect Doug Halter as chair.
Mangone.
Yes.
Duran.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Halter.
Yes.
We have a motion for, and I guess I'll give it off to our chair.
Okay, second vote. Let me see. Motion for that. Okay. We did roll call. We did. We missed public communications. Yeah, but we're gonna do that. Okay. So, formal item number 1, selection of chair and vice chair for calendar year. So now we need to not open nominations for vice chair. Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councilmember Al vice chair. Second that.
Okay. Take the vote. Councilmember Mangone.
Yes.
Councilmember Duran.
Yes. Sir.
Chair Halter.
Yes. I know. Now we're on to item number 2, approval of committee minutes for May 23rd, 2024 special meeting. Accept a motion. Yeah, so moved. There is no, I don't see public comments on it. There's no public comment for that item.
We haven't received any public comments on it.
So a motion is made. Is there a second?
Minutes.
Yeah. Second. Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mangone.
Yes.
Vice Chair Duran.
Vice Chair.
Oh, I apologize. We'll take it again. Vice Chair Mangone.
Yes.
Councilmember Duran.
Yes.
And Chair Halter.
Yes. So informational items. The public may comment on each item listed on the agenda. For information items on the item is taken up. Information items may be reordered. Okay. Never mind. Out of clarity, after we open it and hear the staff recommendation, do you want to hear the public comment after that or after we speak? It varies per committee. Yeah. Here, after the staff report. Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. After staff. Okay. So the, item number 3 is review of fiscal year 2026 proposed operation and capital improvement budget. Open up to that.
Hi, I'm Greg Morley, Chief Financial Officer. I have with me Daryl Brumley. He's our budget manager. We're going to do a presentation about the proposed budget that we're going to take to the full city council on April 22nd. The purpose for us showing this to the FAB is for you have to get feedback from you about how we were presenting information in here, if there's changes to how we want to.
You can sit here. It's okay.
And to get some of your just.
Usually we don't have messages, just staff.
We haven't.
Usually we do.
Next slide.
No, I'm not.
So some of the things we're talking about budget highlights, talking about general fund, our 5-year outlook for the general fund. We have 4 major funds, general fund, measure water, wastewater. So those are highlighted here. And then we're going to talk about grant funding and the account. Next slide. So some of the budget highlights, the general fund, we're projecting a slight increase in the general fund, about 2.2% or $3.3 million. Measure O fund, on the other hand, we're proposing a decrease. It's kind of a significant decrease. It's primarily due to the CIP projects that get funded by Measure O every year. So there's just not as many high dollar projects in Measure O this year as there was last year. Water and wastewater operations are both slightly increasing, and that's but they're relatively flat as far as projections. Then our capital improvement plan, there's a significant increase, about $65 million. This slide doesn't have, it says the majority of the increase is to support Ventura Water Pure, but also more importantly, the membrane bioreactor, which is, as far as what we have budgeted for those two different projects, we have more budgeted for the membrane bio than we do Ventura Water Pure. Next slide, please. Budget overview. This is just an overview of the proposed budget that we have in hand. You see the big slice of that pie, $44 million is capital funds. $251 million of that. I just mentioned those two big projects. They're both a significant contributor to that $251 million. The next thing is general fund, which is $152 million. That's pretty much in line with what you would see with the general fund. It's been growing gradually over the last few years. And you'll always see that that's probably the biggest part of our budget other than capital improvement. Next slide. This is just a bar chart of citywide resources. We say resources. Some people will say revenue by category. We say resources because it's not always budgeted revenue that we have in here. Some of these resources are supported by prior year resources that we've had. Prior year revenue is supported by something we call fund balance. Anyway, as you can see that the two pieces at the bottom of that, which represent taxes and intergovernmental revenue, they're pretty much the same as they were last year. Slight increase in taxes. Well, I say a slight increase, but there's a little bit of an increase in taxes. And then the same thing's true for charges for services. Where you see the big differences on this slide is in FY26, we're proposing $65 million in other revenue. And then in FY26, you see we've got about a $35 million reduction in interfund transfers. The other revenue represents potentially bond revenue from the Ventura Water Pure program. So there's plans to potentially issue a bond next year for Ventura Water Pure. So that's why you see about I guess it's about a $50 million difference in that. And then the other one, the reduction of $35 million for interfund transfer revenue. That's because in FY25 we budgeted. In FY25 we saw a significant amount of cash that was in water and wastewater operations that should be used for water and wastewater capital projects. So we budgeted for that transfer last year. That's why you don't see it this year. Next year. Next slide, please. Just an overview of citywide expenditures. You see the top line says capital outlay, $258 million. Again, that's the CIP projects. Again, it's so high because we have two really, really large projects from Ventura Water in there next year. The next thing is salaries and benefits. See a little bit of an increase in salaries and benefits. Outside of capital expenditures, you'll always see, and you see it right here, salaries and benefits is the greatest part of our budget as well as any other local or state or federal government. You'll see the largest part of their expenditures is going to be personnel expenses. Next slide. And this is general fund resources. Again, general fund revenues. We say resources because as you can see, the very next to the bottom line there says prior year resources. So again, you see taxes, a little bit of an increase in taxes. And we kind of itemize the taxes over on the other side. So you can see property taxes, the highest tax contributor to the general fund, followed by sales tax. And then we have things like, it says vehicle license fee in lieu of property taxes. And then of course, TOT, user utility tax. And then there's a lot of other taxes. So again, just a slight increase in budgeted revenue for taxes for the general fund next year. Next slide. And then general fund expenditures. Again, you see salaries and benefits, the highest thing at the top, and followed by services and supplies, internal service, and then capital outlay. We have some reserves and contingencies budgeted out there. Those reserves and contingencies are all associated with money that we have budgeted from some of the prior year resources that will potentially be transferred to support things like permanent project work for disasters that we've experienced over the last couple of years, dating all the way back to the January 2023 severe winter storms. For some of those, and then some of those reserves and contingencies are there to support items that are in the investment plan. For example, maybe $1.2 million budgeted from the investment plan to support potential improvements to Main Street moves. That's budgeted in a reserve right now. When we find out what the real specifics of a program like that is, we'll transfer that to support that kind of a project. Next slide. Arts and culture funding. Last time we had a budget workshop, there was some discussion about arts and culture funding, and during that discussion that I was hearing from the public, we were hearing some things about grant funding and arts funding, and some of it was getting mixed up. And at one point in time, somebody came up and said there was a city that had like $14 million budgeted for arts. And we found out that was really their Parks and Recreation budget. What they had for arts was a lot less than that. So we did kind of a comparison on arts funding and cultural grant funding. And so we looked at 3 other cities, all of them coastal cities up and down the coast. One, Santa Barbara, very close neighbor of ours. And we looked at Carlsbad, and then we looked up north at Antioch to find out what they actually spend for cultural art granting program. And as you can see, Santa Barbara out of the 4 has the highest budget for cultural art grant program. Ventura at $200,000, and that's a proposed number, is second, and then Carlsbad third, and Antioch fourth. And then at the top of this slide, what you see is a comparison of per capita local government spending for arts in general, which includes cultural art granting or any other cultural. And you can see, this is the nationwide average at the top, and that's per capita local government spending. You see the 3 fiscal years, 2.48 in 22, 3.32, and 2.57. You see in all 3 of those fiscal years, the spending that the city of Ventura does for the arts is actually about 6 times what the national average is. Just a comparison, just a little bit of an answer to some of the questions that were asked at the last budget workshop that we had. Next slide, please. This is a 5-year outlook. Some people like to say it's a 5-year projection. There's not a lot of difference between those 2 words, but we tend to think that when you say projections that we're actually doing a really hardcore granular projection of expenditures or revenues, and that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is looking at an outlook and seeing how things might change in the future, taking into consideration things like the volatile things that are happening in the United States economy right now, the lack of consumer confidence in the markets, things like that. So we look at those as they are right now, and then we look at how they might be in the future, try to determine what kind of growth we'll see in certain tax categories, and we present this outlook. And so as you see in FY 2026, the proposed budget that we're presenting to you tonight, which is what we'll eventually recommend to the full city council for adoption in June, we have a balanced budget. And then FY 27, you see just a little bit of a deficit at the bottom of that. Again, it's based on what changes we might be seeing in the economy in the next year, and then looking out in the next 4 years. $440,000 is like 0.002% of general fund revenue. So you see a $440,000 outlook deficit there, but what you're really looking at is something of a balanced budget in both of those years. And as you can see in FY 29 and out, we start seeing something of a surplus there. Next slide, please. Measure O funding priorities. These 9 bullet points right here are the same 9 bullet points that appeared on the ballot measure in November of 2016. These are also the 9 focus areas that appear in our Measure O ordinance. It's just something to remind everybody of what we spend Measure O money on. Next slide. And so next year we're projecting about $17.5 million in Measure O taxes. Pretty flat compared to what we did this year and what we did last year. Measure O taxes are like general sales taxes. They follow the economy. The economy is changing as we speak. And so it's been pretty flat for about the last year and a half, and it's going to be that way for the next 12 months probably. And then prior year resources, that $5.7 million, that supports those CIP projects that are in the Measure O budget this year. And then the other revenue that $1.3 million represents some reimbursements that we get from other agencies for services that we provide for homelessness. Next slide, please. Measure of expenditures, capital outlay, there's that $8.4 million at the top, that capital outlay. That's what that's what is supported by that prior year resources that I pointed out at the slide before that. You see a little bit of an increase in salaries and benefits, a little bit of an increase in everything else. But overall, you see about a $4 million reduction, maybe a little bit less than that from what we budgeted last year for Measure Up. Next slide. And this is why water and wastewater operations, as I mentioned earlier, you know, they're pretty flat. You can see those last two bars on there. That represents FY25 adopted budget and our proposed budget for next year. Pretty similar to each other. You see, you know, about an $800,000 difference between the 2 years, and that's pretty darn close. So those are pretty flat. As I mentioned, just a little bit of just a slight increase in operational expenditures for both of those. Next slide. And here you see what I've been saying for the whole presentation, this significant increase in the size of that bar at the end of that chart right there. And that represents that budgeting of that membrane bioreactor project and the Ventura Water Pure projects. So you see in capital, wastewater and water capital, you see a significant increase in the budget, which is pretty much what the significant increase in the total budget is. Next slide, please. These are some CIP spending highlights. There you go. Those first two things, membrane bioreactor and Ventura Water Pure, is well over $200,000 just for those two projects. And that's illustrative of what I was talking about in those other slides of the CIP spending. And then you see some of the other CIP projects that we have in the capital improvement spending plan next year. Next slide. And this is a look at our FTA employee history. What's interesting to me about this is that, well, first off, I'll point out that you see we made a pretty significant jump from FY23 to FY24 with the number of FTEs. That was represented by 13 new FTEs for the safer firefighters that we have on board. You see that it remained pretty much the same between 24 and 25. The only difference was that we had one part-time regular FTE that was increased from a 75% FTE to a one FTE. So that was the only change there. And then next year, we're only, as far as regular FTEs go, we're only projecting to have more FTE added to the city staffing and to the budget, and that's to represent the potential for a cybersecurity analyst in our information technology department. But the thing that I was looking at is the number at the top, and so you see about a reduction of almost 9 full-time equivalents citywide, which means we're doing something better with regard to our extra help staffing and how that interacts with our regular staffing. So, you know, basically what it says to me is we've cut down the size of our city staff as we're continuing to deliver the same amount of services. Next slide. And so next steps, May 27th, we're going to have another budget workshop. That's not really that far away. And I think we're going to have another meeting with this, I think the week before that. So very, very close to each other. And then on June the 10th, we'll have a public hearing at the city council meeting to adopt the citywide operational and CIP budgets. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, I want to ask one last time because it may make sense for us to ask questions and then go to public comment. Just because it's kind of fresh on our mind, and then we go to public comment and get our public input. Okay. So are there any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you go back to, you're talking about transfer fund for investments for some, you know, projects like any reference to Main Street units. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, a few years ago, we had an increase to our net position. We had some monies that we had a year just coming out of the COVID pandemic where we had not projected to have a big surplus that year, but we did have a big surplus that year. And then there was about we had in a reserve about $8 million that was settlement from the Southern California Edison suit that occurred after the Thomas fire. And so we took that $8 million and the city council approved at that time. Our former CFO, Michael Kuhn, and former city manager, Alex McIntyre, put together what they called an investment plan. So they found areas in the city of Ventura where they thought it would be good to invest in improvements. And one of them, Main Street Moves, was kind of new to us at that time. And we were talking about having improvements to that and where we're going to be going in the future. So we budgeted about $1.3 million at that time for Main Street Moves and move improvements. And more recently, I think 2 or 3 city council meetings ago, we came, I think it was budget workshop number 1. I had a recommendation in there where I saw some of these other investment plan spending that weren't being used. And city council authorized repurposing $500,000 of that to Main Street Moves. What we have in the budget is what's left from that investment plan, the original intent to use for Main Street Moves, and that's that $1.2 million. There were other things in that investment plan, for example, fire station improvements. It wasn't reflected on one of these slides, but there was $3 million in fire station improvements in that investment plan for doing really a lot of general improvements to fire stations, but more importantly, more recently, we have a really big project afoot to replace HVAC systems in all of our fire stations. About $2.5 million, maybe a little bit more. So that came from that investment plan as well. Another thing that came from that investment plan was the investment in a new enterprise resource planning document, or our new Nansen human resources system.
Okay. So we're gonna,
So items like that were what came out of that investment.
oh, okay.
Main Street Moves was part of
Yeah,
it.
it was just part of it. Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah. So hypothetically, if we were gonna begin implementing like the baller plan, that's where the funds would come from, is from that,
If
or potentially.
the bollards, I think we have an unfunded CIP project in our CIP plan that was recently adopted for bollards on Main Street Moves. And so if needed, that $1.2 million could go towards funding that project.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's why it's been budgeted now, because we knew that there's going to be some more things coming.
Okay.
Even though we don't know the full details of that project, it's not funded per se. You know, I think it's estimated about $2 million. So 1.2 is a little bit short, but it could absolutely be used for that project if we wanted.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. Awesome, thank you. And then, slide 10. Pull that one. The last question. Sorry. That just, can you, where is it? The prior resources. When we look at FY 25 and 26, and then we're looking at the next 5 years. What's the big disparity there?
Yeah, so when we do a proposed budget like we're doing right now,
Yeah.
you see some new one-time expenditures that we don't normally, we didn't see last year. It's just something that's new. For example, we started doing some repairs to the golf course last year, and it was based on funding that we had received from some insurance disbursements related to this catastrophic flood that occurred at the golf course. And so we received the money in a prior year. We came up with the plan to start doing the repairs this current year. And then we'll see some of those repairs follow over into next year. So some of that prior year resource that we had from 2 years ago that supports that right now is getting budgeted next year to support that one-time expenditure. That way we're not using our ongoing revenue that's really there to support our ongoing costs, our core responsibilities, for a one-time expenditure. And the reason that you don't see that amount in the out years is because we don't know if anything is, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you see in the out years is just really to support a small contingency fund.
Sure, understood. Thank you.
Great. We're agreeing.
Yeah, so thank you for that slide in regards to the arts too, and thanks for sharing that. That's good information. Yeah, really good information. I was just a little bit confused on page 2 and 3 of the report. When it was talking about property taxes, now it's now included with the property tax revenue received annually from the state. And it talks about the revenues there. And then on this other one, it says the second largest source of citywide revenues from taxes, which include property taxes. So am I reading it? Am I reading it incorrectly?
No, I think what you referred to the first time was something that I showed on there called um, vehicle license fee in lieu of property tax.
Okay,
So that had previous to this year, this city for some reason reported that outside of the property tax category
Mhm.
because there was kind of a swap going on with that property tax and that license fee. It really is just property tax, so we decided to consolidate it back into the property tax now.
you answered three of my other questions. So on your report, so thank you. And I think that's it for right now.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Duran. Questions is, on the general fund, there's, contingencies of $6.6 million. Give me an example of how contingencies are usually spent.
We have contingencies of $6.6 million.
That's what I said. Slide, it was before that slide.
Oh, the reserves and contingencies
Yes,
have 6.6.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about a while ago when I was talking about the golf course improvements. It's not just related to golf course improvements. It's also related to like the Main Street moves thing that I talked about, that $1.2 million. I have that budgeted in a reserve right now because I don't know what specific project is
okay,
be used.
that's what, okay.
When I get that information, I'll transfer it out of a reserve and put it into something like a CIP project for bollards or something like that.
Okay,
And there's a couple other things like that, like I mentioned the fire station, the HVAC.
Mhm.
But we have some money budgeted in reserve for that HVAC repair, but we don't have the contracts yet. We don't have the bids done. We don't know exactly
so,
the ones we're gonna do first. So it's there and we'll transfer it when the time comes.
you answered, saying, in regards to, there's, an interest in the downtown to do a bathroom pilot, program to allow the, DVP, to take over responsibility for the restroom. I'm assuming that might be a dollar neutral type situation, or maybe even
I don't know if it's dollar neutral or not. We've been aware of it.
okay.
We've included we got an estimate on the cost for the pilot at about $37,000. We included that in the proposal.
Okay, okay, good. And then on the arts one, is it, we have a national average. Do you know how they did that national average? Because if they did, every city across the country has a problem with that.
They did look at local spending all the way across the country, yes. And there was a report that was done by, see if I can come up with the name of this organization, but they're a big arts assistance organization, and they I had the name of them. Grants in the Arts, I think is
What's it called?
Grants in Arts.
It's-
Grants in Arts. Anyway, it's a national organization that does a lot of work to advance the arts. And they help a lot of organizations get grant funding and other things. And so they do these reports every year, just
Okay,
part of their annual report. And it came from their annual report.
and it was called Grants and Arts.
I think it's called Grants in Arts.
Okay.
You know what? I can get that for you real fast.
If you can,
Have it in a,
but in the meantime, we're proposing to spend $12 per person per capita is, so
we,
on the arts.
we've been averaging a little bit more than $12 per capita in the last 3 fiscal years, and next year's budget, the proposed budget, it hasn't changed except for the fact that we've proposed an increase to the cultural art granting, and we've also proposed $125,000 for grants in arts and culture policy study.
Mhm.
And there might be just a little bit more that we've added to the arts budget. So we're still budgeting at a rate that's going to be well above $12 per capita.
And the only thing that's questionable for me on that is that we went from 15 years ago being at $250,000 in grants down to 90,000 in grants last year. And So I'm not quite sure how it stayed even, except for maybe the money was taken out of grants and put into studies, maybe for the arts.
Well, what are you saying that stayed even
Well, you're just saying that it's been pretty much averaging $12 per
for the last 3 years?
for the last 3
Okay,
years.
but
And last year
you made that change back in 2009 or 2010.
I
Reduced the grant. Yeah, it actually happened. when I came to work here.
I just
13
think
years.
remember $90,000 for arts left.
So, yeah, I don't know if I think in a few years after that change was made, it didn't stay even. But in the last 3 years, our spending for arts has been very consistent. Just a little bit over $12 per capita.
And that's counting granting and probably staffing.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the difference.
That counts all of
That's
it
probably worth that.
for arts.
Okay, great. Thank you. And extra help. On the extra help, for the counting of full-time employees, that doesn't count consultants then.
No,
That's on contract.
contractual consultants, no.
Yeah, okay. And so that's, on an as-need basis, there's extra employees that are hired, either full-time or part-time, to help out with a given project or a given need.
That's correct. Most of these, there's not a lot of just, sudden given new projects with a given need. Most of this is budgeted and thought about very,
Okay,
very, very strong. There's a lot of good thought that goes into it. A lot of it. We have a lot of, seasonal extra help employees that assist in all of the big parks and recreation programs that we have. You know, we know about that all the time. It's always a big significant part of our budget. We have programs like police cadets. So we know what they do. We know when they're going to be needed. So there's not a lot of, hey, I just need somebody. But that does happen every now and then. We try to budget for it. We try to talk to the departments and say, you got anything, for example, a couple of years ago when we were going to implement this enterprise resource planning
Right.
document, we knew that there was going to be people like Mr. Brumley that was going to be spending 50 to 75% of his time constructing, architecting, and configuring a new computer system. So I might need somebody to backfill his regular duties. So we tried to think about those things when we know about it. But every now and then something comes up and I said, you know what, I just need somebody.
and then, one final question is that, do we through the year look at, overtime and seeing if it makes more sense to hire another full-time employee
To
and do that?
compensate for the overtime? Not really. Our overtime expenditures aren't really that high except with regard to public safety.
Okay.
And most of the time, the overtime expenditures for public safety are related to the fact that, you know, when your full-time job is to drive a patrol vehicle and you're sick, somebody's got to get in that patrol vehicle.
Right.
It's really hard to reduce that kind of an overtime.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense to get another full-time employee because now you're overstaffed. So it doesn't.
I was just looking from a private sector standpoint, it's just an analysis that we do all the time, just looking at, is it time for us to hire somebody new? But obviously, if there's special skills out there, such as in public
I
safety.
think we would, if we were gonna do that, we'd probably look more at the extra help employees than we would the overtime.
Okay,
To say if a department, say Public Works ended up, well, I've got let me see, what's the position of an engineering aide, an extra help engineering aide. I've got one here, and one here, and one here, and they're all working about 40% time. Then it's the time saying, well, does it make sense to get a new FTE here rather than having 3 people doing stuff? Particularly when that extra help person might leave you very suddenly.
I did say it was last, but maybe this is a half question. Is regarding community development. I know we're very heavy in using consultants on that one. So, I guess that's more specific on whether or not that's a long-term strategy of always using outside help versus bringing full-time employees back in.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's a long-term or short-term strategy. I think you're probably referring to the planning
Exactly, plan checkers.
plan check
Yeah, that's so.
tracks. And so, yeah, that's a couple of years old. So I don't know what the strategy is going to be on that.
Okay,
I don't know whether they really have staffing position wise to do that task. So,
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate the answers to the questions. If I can, is there any public comments on this item?
We do have 3 public comments. Our first speaker is Alyssa Gutierrez. Alyssa, you'll have 3 minutes.
And welcome.
AR half of the treatments on the investment fund that as of February, even with the influx of 500,000, is down to 1.1. This is not earmarked specifically for bonds. Even if it were, we're at a deficit of $900,000 for capital improvement program for 2026 and 2030. I mean, just $2 million for the. And as far as I understand, this money is already currently being spent on a daily basis by community development. They're doing like workshops. They're going to be putting in temporary residence for the summer. So 1.1 in February. Don't know what it is today. Or it's going to be in 6 months from now. So I don't see that as a viable way to fund those dollars. I think we're at a critical juncture right now. July 8th, Treasury Moloch. The property owners are looking for progress. They're looking for an investment in the city. Putting it in reserves that's kind of there, kind of not. I don't think that's going to cut it for them. Same for the business owners. We're asking them in the fall to reinvest again in their parcels. It'll be the second time for their financial investment. The city needs to start meeting them halfway. I know it's new to the capital improvement program, but it's a new request for the business property owners. For the citizens. Having this would be a huge improvement, and it could help economic vitality downtown.
Great, thank you.
Our next speaker is Zachary Kitt.
Hi, so Paul, thank you for your final question. I know just essentially care about these news and New York State, so it's good to hear. I'd love to hear a little bit more details about how the state got granted. So we'll share that when we get it. About the followers of the planner is like, I guess I was worried because it's not currently with the fizzle line item. So there's implications might be if it's not actually in the budget expressly. I know that there's some things about that. But it would be great to see it a little bit more formalized because I think there's a lot of excitement to see this done sooner than later. So I just hope that you'll keep that in mind as this process goes forward. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Mr. Albiani.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. It was a good presentation. It was very concise. I was just trying to follow. It was first presented with an income and expenditures generally on the general fund. And then it jumped over to, if I remember right, I think the slide slipped into the CIP on water, wastewater. And I was looking for the connection in particular on the water wastewater, which is an enterprise fund. I was looking for the connection of where the revenues are, where the expenditures are that coincide with with those CIPs and the huge cost associated with those CIPs and the timing of them. So it was a little disjointed in my mind trying to follow it, because we went from general fund discussion over to CIP and wastewater enterprise fund. Then we went back and finished up with general discussion again. So just looking for a little more information when we jump into the huge expenditures that are associated with water and wastewater. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the input. I might have one more speaker, I think.
Yeah, we'll have one more. Is it Javier? Yeah, Jameer.
Yes,
Welcome.
so I want to talk about it's very important investment. Like the hopefully council meeting, there are about time plan or like timeline of when to install it.
first priority. Yeah. That's all I need.
Great, thank you for the input, appreciate it. Okay, are there any other speakers?
That's it, sure.
That's it, okay, with that, it's back to the committee members.
Mr. Morley, any comments on that?
There was just one comment about the statement that the community development department is spending that money as we speak. That's absolutely not true. It was $1.2 million when I came to the city council to make that transfer a couple of months ago. It remains $1.2 million. It will not get spent until some other department or the city manager's department comes up with a plan for the spending to include potentially bollards.
If I may follow up on that real quick and just ask, is there a reason why we wouldn't have bollards as a line item? Is it because we don't have a fully fleshed out plan yet for what that cost is going to entail?
Yeah, as far as planning for the CIP project itself, it's still in progress. And so the Public Works Department hasn't come forward with a plan to add that to the work plan projects for the CIP project. At that time, they'll be coming to the city council. If they determine that's what they're going to do, they'll be coming. That conversation has been occurring for the last couple of weeks. I think it's going to happen, but I'm just a dumb accountant, so.
So when we're looking at timeframes for that to happen, we should be talking directly to the Public Works Department and Community Development. Yeah.
If it's going to be a CIP project, I would talk to the Public Works Department.
Okay.
They're in communication with community development all the time about it.
Okay, great. Sorry. Back to my colleagues.
That answered my question.
Okay.
Hey, just a quick question, Mr. Morley, in regards to the trees. Last time at our last workshop, we talked about increasing money in the tree budget or planting trees. Did any more money get in that? There was a comment made about maybe increasing that about $250,000. Did that get?
I don't recall. I think we did have an increase in proposed or requested spending for trees, but I don't remember what the specific dollar amount. Do you remember that?
I do not. We will have to look into.
Before this comes back to CCAM, could I get that information?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, he's writing it down. We'll send you a message.
And I was just just a quick question in regards to like, as I was going through this housing, community development, salaries and benefits, services and supplies, it shows, adopted 2025, and then it shows nothing in proposed. I see some of those don't have numbers for proposed.
Yeah, actually, we have corrected an attachment. We did a little bit of an error. So this.
I know what you're talking about. Okay.
This is the updated one, and it should be.
I saw that this morning. I was looking at the attachment. I said, well, we're going to get a question about that.
There was there was a few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually the salaries and benefits are.
Is this instead of me taking only one, is this available?
But yeah, you will receive the updated attachment with your city council package.
Okay.
Okay, and then, okay, just in regards to one of the public speakers is when you're looking at the enterprise fund of water and wastewater, is there, I imagine there is, I just don't recall, a concise page that shows where the revenue is coming from and what's being spent, itemized expenses for the wastewater and for water. Is it something that we could compare directly since it is an enterprise fund?
I don't think we provided that in the proposed budget, but in the adopted budget, you certainly can. Breakdown of revenues.
I know the concern is more so than, I mean, I think it's maybe the same in the public as well as at the council is when things come before us to for another increase of 500,000 or whatever it is for a contract or whatever, just seeing what's really left in that budget, how much have we drawn down on the WIFIA fund or with whatever funds we have. So oftentimes it's just an isolated item that says budgeted for or not budgeted for, and it'd be nice to know how we're doing against, did we spend 60% of the money and are we 60% through with the process? Obviously not the build out yet, but
You can absolutely, we can provide those comparisons.
okay,
Um,
I think that would be helpful.
I'm not. There's a possibility, I'll ask Mr. McDonald, we might be able to get, a supplemental attachment before April 22nd and provide that kind of information. Otherwise, we'll absolutely bring it to the recommended budget in June
Okay.
or to the next FAB meeting.
And second, I need to re-hit it just for a second, is obviously I'm somebody that's been involved with the arts for a very long time. So some of that information seemed a little surprising to me. So I want to double check that to see how if we're comparing apples to apples or not. But I know that for a city that has the type of cultural arts that this city has, it's a significantly low dollar amount that has ever been spent in the city's history towards cultural arts. And when you look at a national average, there are many cities that are under the umbrella of the metropolitan city that they're sitting next to. So they probably wouldn't have their own budget because they really don't consider themselves a separate city. Like Ventura is one of the original cities in California, a separate city from the conglomerate of Los Angeles, as an example. So it wouldn't really be, in my eyes, a necessary fair comparison. But I just know for the limited dollars that are spent in this community, even if it is $12 per person for the cultural arts, the return on that investment is huge, absolutely huge. So I'm looking at ways to increase prosperity. And if we're looking at spending more money on trees, even though I'm a landscaper, I think there's ways to get trees donated and taken care of. That trees aren't necessarily economic generator. It's not going to generate more prosperity, generate more beauty, and will take care of a lot of the greenhouse gases and all the other things that a lot of us are concerned with. But will it generate more prosperity for the community? I would argue, and I hate to as a landscaper because I love both, but there's a direct correlation between spending money for something like the arts. So I just want to make sure as we look at some of these budgeted items, that we're comparing apples to apples.
So just a quick point
Yeah,
of clarification.
Go ahead.
When you mentioned small city that's part of a larger metropolitan area, with regard to local government spending. So if I take a small metropolitan area that's close to Los Angeles, California, and they don't spend a lot on arts because Los Angeles does, there are still both local governments and they're included in the study.
Right.
So it includes a city like Los Angeles that might be budgeting for all the little suburbs around it, as well as Santa Fe, New Mexico, who leads the way in arts fund
Right.
spending. So all of those cities are involved in the local government numbers that are in that study.
And I distinctly remember the conversation with Carl's, and I think a lot of us knew there was some misinformation being shared that amongst council. But I'm not quite sure the difference being money spent on the cultural arts inside the city, meaning inside the city hall with city staff and programs, versus supporting the cultural arts that are blossoming in the community. And I think that's the big difference.
So
Look at it.
The comparison with the city of Carlsbad was just for a cultural art granting program.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was brought up in the last city council meeting. That city was referenced in conversation as well as Antioch. They were referenced in conversation. So we just looked at cultural art granting programs.
Yeah.
The arts spending itself includes the cultural arts granting programs and all of the other cultural programs that are included under the auspices of the arts umbrella.
I got to ask the question. One final one is having gone to Concord High School many decades ago, why Antioch? Antioch is nowhere near compared to Ventura in any way, shape, or form.
One of your colleagues asked about that city at the last city council meeting.
Okay. Not to badmouth Antioch, but it's a far cry difference between the communities.
Right,
Yeah.
I understand. It was
Okay.
just referencing conversation, so we make sure we include.
I see. Gotcha. Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, comment.
Please.
So, yeah, in regards to the arts, right? Because you compared Santa Barbara, which is they spent 250,000 and we spent 200,000. In Carlsbad, I remember somebody yelling out like, well, they spent $1.6 million.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And so, yeah, so I mean, in comparison to what we're spending, we're right in there with Santa Barbara. Carlsbad. See,
Well, yeah, and so our proposed cultural art granting program for next year
yeah,
exceeds Carlsbad by
yeah,
$80,000.
yeah,
That $1.6 million that somebody brought up,
yeah,
Yeah.
the umbrella of arts, which included their cultural art granting program. And that was the thing. So it made it sound like they're spending all that money on cultural arts granting, but
right,
that's a small portion of their overall arts budget,
Mhm.
which is the $1.6 million that they spend is pretty comparable to what we spend
sure.
on arts.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for that information because it really helps wrap my head around.
Absolutely.
That was good information. And then in regards to the trees, I'm really trying to help you, Steve.
Thank you.
In regards to the trees, I get it. It's not something that's gonna like make us money, but it is part of our goals. It's
Absolutely.
part of our goals. So, and we've lost so many trees in such a short period of time. That's why I think that's important as well.
No,
Yeah,
and I would agree with my colleague that it's extremely important. And it's something that I advocate for all the time. But since they came up in the same conversation, similar dollar amounts, completely different outcomes.
Yeah.
And on top of that, with trees, there's many different ways that we could get the carbon retention done. That's in addition to trees. But I would favor trees all up and down our streets. And so I love that. So I'm not persuading, I'm not saying that that's not a program we should support. I do get concerned though when I know that the granted money last year was $90,000. That's what was budgeted for, was 90,000. And that's the way it's been for 15 years. So now that we're jumping to 200,000, I'm hoping that that 200,000 is granted money and not the rest of the program, because it sounded like it was the rest of the program as well, meaning the staff member. That's what
The proposed increase to $200,000 is specifically
granted.
for granting
Okay,
programs, cultural art granting programs.
very good. Okay, and any other questions? No?
And I sent you an email message that had that information.
Oh, I didn't see that.
They're called Grant Makers in Arts.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay, is there anything else to see? That was it for item number 3. That's all you needed was input? And,
Yeah.
Okay.
You might tell me to sit up straighter and try to enunciate and speak more clearly.
No, no. You're doing great. Items for future agendas.
we're coming back soon on this, aren't we?
We're coming back to, we'll have a similar discussion to the one we had today.
Yeah.
But it'll be a little more refined with regard to what's gonna end up being recommended for adoption in June.
Yeah.
To include conversations about where we were with that tree question
Yeah.
that you had.
Yes.
Maybe come up with some ideas and maybe need to circle back towards the later on in the year. Additional meetings, we can talk about the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and are there any comments from staff? Any additional communication? Okay, seeing none, this meeting was adjourned at 4:56 p.m. Thank you very much. Good to see everybody.